right?
It's not only there with Christ, it's also there with neighbors sometimes, with friends.
Well, there you go. And I did not prompt Greg ahead of time. That's the crux. And I'll speak to it briefly and then we'll, because I don't want to steal anybody else's thunder. For Paul, there's no difference between what Christ does in changing the relationship between us and God and what Christ does in changing the relationship between us and each other. Say that again. For Paul, in his mind, there's no difference between the state of affairs that's changed between us and God because of Jesus and the state of affairs that's changed between one another because of Jesus. And what we're going to unfold a little bit is we tend to privilege one over the other. We really like to focus on how God has changed my relationship with himself. And has he?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Total. And Paul is carefully laying out just how great a change has been wrought between you and God. But we tend to emphasize that to some and sometimes ignore the fact that the radical reconstruction of the relationship between each other is the expression of the radical change in your relationship with God. And so, to Greg's point, that wall of hostility that characterizes sinners. I don't know if you've noticed this about people. We have a hard time getting along with each other. We have a hard time getting along with each other. And it is a central expression of our sinfulness, is our inability to get along with each other. And the work of Christ, it's clear, and we'll unfold this as well. In Jesus' body, the enmity, the hostility that we have between one another, that's been nailed to the cross. Not only your sin debt before God, that's what we tend to think of when we think of what Jesus accomplished on the cross, is he took this barrier of sin away between me and God. But Paul is careful to say here, what other barrier has been destroyed by the death of Jesus on the cross? The barriers between each other. All right? Yes, sir.
I hate to ask this in public, but does that also relate to the responsibility of a man in the marriage?
And that's very good. Paul is going to really, in many ways, spend the rest of his letter unfolding that. And so he'll start, this is primarily between ethnic groups, because he's really talking about Jews and Gentiles, but he'll just keep walking that out until he gets to marriage in chapter 5, and to the relationships inside of the church, our sort of one-on-one relationships. Every single configuration of human relationships have been redefined and rectified by what Christ has done for us. Yes, sir.
As far as building, the cornerstone is part of the foundation.
That's right.
And since Jesus is the foundation, there's where we start. Our relationship first with God, then with man, and then he moves on in, like you said, the marriage and all of these other things.
That's right.
But that cornerstone, it's got to be there.
Yeah, that's right. And so we have to have a proper foundation. But I think that what Paul is doing is he's saying the building that sits on top of the foundation is going to look a certain way. And y'all remember the foundation that went in on the new buildings? Those of you who are around for that.
Yes.
I mean, we about dug to China to get the piers and the foundation sufficient to build the new building on top of. Would it have struck you if, as you watched all the digging and excavation, and then the cement pilings being poured in, the big trucks coming in and pouring all that concrete in, and on and on and on and on, and then the slab gets poured, and then you come back and there's a little cardboard shack built on top of that. You may think, well, if we were going to build a cardboard shack, we'd probably over-engineer the foundation a little bit. Probably could have saved some money, right? But so often, and in fact, Paul will say to the Corinthians, you need to be careful how you build. Remember that it's in 1 Corinthians 10, I think. Nope, that's wrong. 1 Corinthians 3. Some people build with gold, silver, and precious stones on top of the foundation that's Christ. And that's what you ought to build with, because that's what Christ is worthy of. But what do some other people build on top of that foundation? What kind of?
Wood, stubble, and hay.
Wood, hay, and stubble. Wood, hay, and stubble. And what Paul is saying here is building on top of what Christ has done with relationships that still look like the world's relationship. That's wood, hay, and stubble. That's an unworthy building, unreflective of an understanding of what kind of foundation we've been given. What kind of building ought to be built on the foundation that is Christ? You guys tell me, what kind of building should you build? The temple, the most beautiful thing that's ever been built, should be built on top of a foundation like that. And it can go, because it's the greatest foundation that can never fail. There's no height too high. There's no breadth too broad. It's going to be beautiful. It's going to do what temples do, which is proclaim to the world what's highest and most valuable. And the way that looks, the adornment that characterizes such a building is a tremendous love for one another. Is this tremendous love for one another. Everybody else may not be able to get along with each other, but Christians, we're supposed to love one another. We're supposed to be great at getting along with each other. And so the last 2,000 years, is that a story of Christians getting along with each other? Got some black marks on it, doesn't it? Well, it's a good thing that Baptists never have any trouble getting along with each other. And on one level, in fact, the most important level, I don't intend to pick on anybody about that. It's very, very, very hard to get along with each other.
Especially for the pastor.
That's right. It's sometimes hard for pastors and congregations to get along with each other. Have you ever seen that before?
Yes.
Right? And it's because it's very difficult. In fact, it takes a miraculous inworking of Christ to make it possible. All right, so we'll pull all of that apart in just a moment. What else do you see in this passage? Yes, sir.
So following along on your analogy of tearing down the temple of the highest and best use, remember I was a builder for
Right,
a year.
right.
As we drive around Fairhope and you go particularly South Mobile, Fruit and Nut, you see an old temple that is being bulldozed and raised. And what comes up in its place? This magnificent home that fits. So when in verse 15, and Greg talked about the wall of hostility, but in 15 it says where he had broken down the wall, he did it by ending the system of law with its commandments and regulations. Because so much of what separated the Jews and the Gentiles was the Jews were keeping score. No, you broke that one. Broke that one too. And the Gentiles, there's no way they were getting in because they were rule breakers.
There's a particular reference here. If you went to the temple in Jerusalem, because the second temple was still standing when Paul wrote this letter, you would have encountered, if you went into the temple courts, you would have encountered a wall. Anybody know what that wall was?
Separation.
It was the court of the Gentiles and then the court of the Jews. And above the door, going from the court of the Gentiles and the court of the Jews, there was a sign that said, Gentiles who go through this door do so at their peril. They will be killed if they go through this door. They are not to come in. And one of the things that Paul is pointing out, and Paul said, and I was this guy, is that I thought the law of God was to keep people out. But is God's purpose for revealing himself through the law, his purpose was to keep people out?
Nope.
He was giving us a way, what?
To get in.
To get in. We were all out. We were good at out. We had that mastered. When did we go out? When did out start?
The apple.
The apple. You're out. Being out is the problem. And the law was given as a way for God to create this people who had access to him. And then this people, they had one job. What was the job of Israel with respect to the Gentiles? To shine the light. You're a light to the Gentiles. You're to show this living way, this vibrant way, and say, come on now, you have to come the way God has called you to come. But the point is that the whole world would find a blessing in Abraham's God. That was central to the plan. But somehow, and not somehow, sinfulness always does this, human beings have managed to take a good thing and turn it into a bad thing. And it was no longer a way to let people in, it was a way to keep score. And the way that the Jews had set it up was they would always win and everybody else was always losing. And they had cherry-picked the law. There's a verse in the law that in Leviticus it says, love your neighbor as yourself. Right? But that,
Certain neighbors.
right? That, and what they started to emphasize, and this is really what Paul talks about, is, and I think this is what he means primarily by works of the law, are the things that externally can be seen by others to show that you're good. And so they like the parts of the law that other human beings could see. And so the tassels on the hem of your garment, and the food you ate, and the people you ate with, those sorts of things. And it became very external. And so when Jesus came, the true Jew, and began to preach to them, what was his charge against the Pharisees, for instance? What did Jesus say? Well, what's a hypocrite?
You say this, but you do this.
Right, and give me that dynamic. What's a hypocrite?
Says one way and do it.
Right, there's an external way, and hypocrite really was a mask. It's the Greek word for a mask that would be worn by actors. You look a certain way on the outside, but it actually hides how you really are on the inside. And Jesus didn't say, so get rid of the outside and change the inside. It's not really what Jesus said.
Bring the outside in.
The outside should come in. Don't neglect these former things. It ought to. Your whole life ought to be transformed, but your heart should match your outside. You tithe, you're mint, and you're dill, and you're cumin, but inside you're dead men's bones inside of you. The whitewashed tombs, but inside you're full of dead men's bones, right? Human beings will take anything and turn it into a way to keep score, to say, I'm doing well and you're not doing so well. All right, so what else do you see in this passage? What jumped out at you?
Say that again.
What jumped out at you? Any final thoughts? Well, let me take you through a few things about this. And I just really want to hammer home really what I've already laid out for you. And this is what I want you to, I want us all to really think about it. Because all of us have our own stories of discord and broken relationships. All of us probably have groups of people that we just prefer not to be around. We live in a time where hostility is constantly being stoked. I've mentioned this before. There's a really, and I would encourage you guys, if you can watch this, it's called The Social Dilemma. The Social Dilemma. It's a documentary. And it really examines the creation of and the creators of social media. And what the creators of Facebook admit to, they just say it, is they took the principles of slot machines, so the same psychology of the slot machine is what is used in social media
Dopamine.
to get a little dopamine hit to go. And it is to give you just enough of that little hit to make you pull the lever.
More.
Just scroll one more, just get you to do one more, right? And then the reward, the gold coin, is resentment.
Is what?
Resentment. If they can stoke you going, yeah, that is the best way to keep you pulling the handle, is they use resentment to do that. And of course, they don't care what they have to do to get your attention, because you reward them with your attention. And so they'll get it. They're like a misbehaving child. They'll get attention any way they can, and they found that resentment is the best way. And so they create a resentment-filled world. And your thought is, well, the world is filled with resentment, that's why I'm resentful. No, you're filled with resentment, and you're looking for it and want to find it, because that's what your disposition towards. And you start to love resentment.
Is that what X and Instagram and
They're all,
podcasts?
yes,
all
it's,
about?
it's all, well,
Extract what you want.
if it bleeds, it leads. You know, that goes all the way back to when we used to get our news off of actual newspapers, but still the same thing. If you really wanted to catch people's attention, it needs to be negative. It needs to be negative. People like fear, and anyway, it's why there's a category called human interest stories, because we know that people also kind of like a sweet story, but not much. We'll stick that at the end of a broadcast, or we'll put it, give you a little bit of that. But mostly what people want is to hear bad news and to hear why other people need to be looked at with suspicion. All right, so anyway, point is, we are predisposed because of our sinful nature towards hostility, resentment, fear. Get him before he gets you, all of that, and that is stirring in our hearts. That gets writ large in several ways, and I would be remiss if I did not hit this with you this morning. One of the ways it has gotten writ large over the years is racism. And so one of the dynamics going on in this passage is that it's racial. There are Jews and there are Gentiles, and we hate each other. We've always hated each other. Our grandparents hated each other, and on and on and on and on and on. And you can tell by the outside, the way people look, what group you're in. And our group's better than your group. And that's just the way it is. And the gospel says, absolutely no. Absolutely no. The gift of Jesus to the world, the gift of Judeo-Christianity to the world, is we're all the same. We're all the same. I saw this great, I watch lots of documentaries. I think you've been able to see that. And I ran across something I had never thought about before. It was about a 30-minute documentary on German prisoners of war in America. 370,000 German prisoners of war in America. Did you know that? That's a lot. Started with the defeated El Alamein in North Africa, and all those guys, they just surrendered. 100,000 of them surrendered, something like that. And so they went to America. And they're Nazis. They come to America, and they are Nazis. But they spend 3 or 4, 5 years before they're repatriated. And the story of the transformation of coming to this place that's not perfect, nobody says it's perfect, but where, first of all, how were German prisoners treated in the United States? What do you think?
Well.
Very well, much better than their own army treated them.
Yeah.
So they were blown away by that. How were POWs in Germany treated? Terrible. Because Germans were taught Nazi ideology said they don't deserve to be treated any other way. Why would you give a square meal to your enemy? That's weak. And so the way they were treated and then the way they watched Americans treat each other. And then this strange thing started to happen. American citizens would come to the prisoner of war camps with care packages and homemade cookies, and they would hear of a need. These German soldiers got medical treatment they would have never received because they weren't in the right category of people, even in Germany. And this stunning display of a real belief that everybody has equal value in the sight of God, which is not what Nazis are taught, right? Transformed them. They did not believe that was possible. They didn't believe that world actually existed. They were told that Americans were weak, shiftless, sentimentalists who couldn't really get organized to do anything. And they saw something different. And one of the stories of the rebuilding of Germany and the rebuilding of Europe was sending these 370,000 POWs back with a new vision of what democracy could be. I say all that to say this: Jesus is the one who made possible and gave to the world this fundamental truth that makes a world like ours possible. We're so accustomed to the idea that all men are created equal, right? That's in our Declaration of Independence. We begin to think that's a feature of rationality. It's rational to believe that all people are equal. Let me ask you this: is it rational to believe that all people are equal? Is it rational? Well, look around the room. Is everybody in here equal? We have strengths and weaknesses. Some of you are tall, some of you are short, some of you are smart, some of you are maybe not so smart, you know. All of that, right? And it would be easy to put everybody in their box according to whatever set of things that we think are important. Now, is it true that we're all equal in the sight of God? Yes. Yes. But we know that's true because of one reason: Jesus. We know that's true because we had to get told that. A voice from heaven had to come and tell us that, or we wouldn't know it. And then it works because God has wired the world that way. But it has to be replenished and lived out by people who are in personal relationship with Him. Even that idea, we're all equal, makes sense to non-believers. But what we've seen is what the culture does when it tries to take equality and yank spirituality out of it. It turns into tyranny. Isn't that crazy? How badly we need Jesus to get along with each other, right? And so it's the church's job then to bear witness and to live in the power that makes that kind of love for one another possible. It doesn't come any other way. But inside the community of faith, we're to be characterized by people who used to not like each other, who used to not be able to get along with each other, whose parents and grandparents didn't like each other and wanted to live on opposite sides of the town and had their own little descriptions of how that was. That used to be how it was. But it can't be that way anymore. I've shared my stories of being in Southwest Mississippi, my first pastor in the late 90s. And I grew up in the South, but I didn't grow up in the context of the kind of racism I would encounter in Southwest Mississippi. Them people hated black people. And I was not going to not be able to comment about that because I believed in Jesus. And as man, it'd make them mad. Had a guy call, threatened to kill me, you know. And y'all been around me a little enough to know I'm not a wild-eyed radical. But there is no place for things like racism in the heart of a Christian. There is no place for racial prejudice in the heart of a Christian. Yes, sir.
Why do you think Paul saw that, but Peter didn't?
Well,
He was a little slower.
But on the roof in Joppa, the sheet comes down, and Peter says, I'm not going to eat that. And then remember, why does Peter say he's not going to eat those unclean things? Why?
They were raised up.
I'm just trying to be a good Jewish boy. I'm being a good covenant man.
Not as much as Paul.
That's right. And so, now, like all of us, Peter struggled. Okay? And he would have ups and downs. And so the same man who stood at the Jerusalem Council and said, there is no reason for there to be any, we're going to not put any burdens on our Gentile brothers. It's just Jesus. It's just Jesus. Which was the key moment in the future of the history of Christianity. And yet he's the same guy who wanders up to Antioch and loses his nerve and doesn't have the guts to stand up to some Judaizers, and so he kind of shrinks back. We all struggle to be faithful to the high calling in Christ Jesus. Yes, sir.
If you look to the crux of the whole thing is how is God glorified?
Yeah.
John 17, Christ, prayer for the believer.
Mhm.
I mean, this thing just screams.
Yeah. Yeah. That we would be one. And what, because this is the thing that blows me away about that passage. Father, make them one as, you remember what the rest of the verse is?
You and I are one.
As you and I are one. Now, how unified are the Father and Son? They're the definition and the ground of unity. And he wants us to be one like that. And so that's a good transition. Not only can we talk about some of these, an issue like racism is an issue that our minds jump to, and of course, and it has been the church that has announced that there really can be another way to live to the world. It's Christians who stood up and said, no, we can't act like that. Why is there no slavery in the West? Because of Christians. That's why there's no slavery in the West. This idea that the West is this horrible colonizing place, you're totally wrong about that, and we can talk about that after it's over. But the gift of Christianity to the West is that truth being proclaimed prophetically. But let's not get trapped in the highfalutin social issues and forget that where this is lived out is here. It's right here in Fairhope, in your relationships, in the people you rub shoulders with and live with and work with every single day. And so, and all of those things that used to separate us, those have been knocked down, but not because now we're just all going to be nice. We need a positive vision for what that way of being in the world is going to look like, and that positive vision is Jesus. We pursue Jesus, and then what happens to us is all of us are pursuing Jesus together. What happens?
We become like
that
Jesus.
we become one, right? It's not just togetherness for the sake of togetherness, but because we're all in pursuit of Christ, differences in commitment, these worldviews. I'm this religion, you're that religion. I'm on this team, you're on that team. All of those commitments other than Jesus that kept us separate from one another, all those are gone. And my main thing is I'm committed to Jesus. I'm a part of a racial reconciliation group that meets. We met a couple of weeks ago. I meet with some black pastors, and we are much of racial reconciliation work has been captured by leftists. And they don't have a Christian vision, they have a Marxist vision for what an equal society looks like, and it's ruined the work. I think over the last decade and a half, there is less unity between races, right? Because we've focused on and stoked what makes us different, and what's not fair, and what you did, and it's graceless, and so it doesn't work. And so what we've been doing is working on a statement so that we can say to people, if you want to do the work of racial reconciliation and you want to partner with us, we're aimed at Jesus. So we believe that Jesus is the animating reality of reconciliation. And so if you're not aiming at Jesus, there is no partnership. And so Jesus is the one who calls us beyond all other commitments and loyalties to him and him alone, differences and consequences. Sometimes when people are very different from us because life has broken them or they've been through a lot of brokenness, we struggle to be able to relate to one another. I found myself several years ago in Parchman Prison, which is the state penitentiary in Mississippi, to do ministry there. By God's grace, I guess I could say, I didn't have a lot in common with the guys we were meeting with. They'd been through things that I didn't understand. They'd been raised in ways that I didn't understand. In fact, here's what characterizes people who are in the hardest parts of a prison. And we were in unit 34, I think it was. That's the guys who were doing hard time. One of the things I learned about those guys is no one had ever been nice to them. Not one day, no one had ever been nice to them. That's how you generate people who are really hard on other people, is you make sure no one is ever kind to them, ever. And so they had made a lot of lifestyle choices that I didn't make. They had gone down a lot of roads that I hadn't gone down. And so initially I was a little on my heels as to how to connect, how to relate. But then something amazing happened. We started talking about Jesus. And the cross is a place where we can all stand. And one of the things that reminded me is, in God's sight, was there any difference between me and them?
Nope.
Nope. I had the same fundamental problem that they had, and there was only one solution. It was the same solution for us all. And this incredible unity as men came to Christ, we found out that we were brothers. We found out that we were brothers. And when I got the privilege of looking them in the eye and saying, "You're my brother," well, they just could hardly believe somebody like me would think that somebody like them was my brother. And it was just a gospel thing. Yes, sir.
Trouble was it for you to break down that wall to the point where they said we're all together?
Yeah, you had to be in there several days, and they needed to ask you about 10 times. Now, you're not being paid to come in here. Nobody's compensated. That was the thing that because all they ever knew is to get anything, there's got to be some kind of transactional arrangement that occurs. And that's what we would go and do, is we would love the rule of Kairos. The ministry is listen, love, love. Listen, love. And we would go in and let them look them in the eye and let them talk. And no matter what they said, we would tell them the gospel. Jesus loves you. So, I know I've told you this story before. I was sitting in front of a guy who was going to spend his life in prison. And my partner to share the gospel was Luke Woodham. Luke Woodham was the Pearl High School shooter. Y'all remember? Luke was in some ways it's thought of as the first person. He was the first school shooter. This would have been the late 90s. Okay? He was a devil worshiper when all that went down. So if you're a devil-worshiping school shooter, what might you assume is going to be your relationship with God?
Not good.
Yeah. And Jesus found Luke Woodham in prison. And he got saved. And he has the same seminary degree as I do, New Orleans, from the same school, because New Orleans has a seminary inside of Parchman Prison. And Luke Woodham and I led this guy to Christ.
Did he get out? Luke?
Luke is never getting out, you know? I don't really disagree with that. That's another conversation, but Luke's come to recognize that God found a way, but now, there's something completely new. And so, all Luke Woodham and I needed to be on exactly the same page with Jesus. And I'll have to really kick my game up a bunch to have had as much kingdom impact as Luke Woodham will have when we're all standing and getting evaluated on Judgment Day. Because that guy has led thousands of people to Christ.
Wow.
Because I watched him do it when I was sitting next to him. This guy's like, I am nothing, I am zero, I'm less than zero. It's been 6 months since he says, anyone's visited me. I haven't seen my own children in years. They wish I was dead. It's over for me. And then Luke Woodham says, you know who I am? And the guy says, yeah, I know who you are. He says, if God can save me, God can save you. And that's powerful stuff, and that's because we're all working off the same sheet of music. Differences in commitment, differences in consequences, even differences in culture. Just because you grew up one place and not another, speaking a language and not another, that's the power of the gospel that I've gotten to see as I've gone to other places in the world. You go to the other side of the world, and Jesus saves. You go out in the jungle, Jesus saves. You go in the middle of Calcutta, and Jesus saves. You go to the outskirts of Lima, Jesus saves. You go to the upper jungle of the Andes to talk to Quechua people who don't even have a word for grace. They get saved. And so, since all of that is the case, all of these walls have been destroyed. They've been destroyed. And who built these walls anyway? We did. We did. So do you think Jesus can tear down stuff we built? Sure he can. And so all of these things that keep us separated from each other, they're down. And so it bridges differences. It requires a deep dependence on Christ. If I'm going to love you and care for you, it's going to be because I've put my hope on Jesus. Jesus is going to help me do that. Jesus is going to help me do that. One of these guys that was his mind was filled with racist commitments in Southwest Mississippi came to me. And the cracks were beginning to occur in his worldview. And he says, so if some young black teenagers walk into our church, I'm supposed to love and care for them and ask them to sit next to me and worship alongside them?
Yes.
So what do you mean? What else would you do? Well, I mean, I came to church one time with a baseball bat because I'd heard a black person tried to come. A bird went out. That's what I thought we were supposed to do. Nope. And you can just see the freedom that comes by that. And soon this guy was going on mission trips to Romania, working among people he'd been told all his life were subordinate to him, and transformation. Yes, sir.
Do you believe our church is ready for interracial?
Sure. Now, and we are. We're not big time, but in fact, I'll say it like this: not only do I want us to be a place where the doors are open to come, and people talk about our church's friendliness and welcoming, and to people to meet Jesus and to follow the Bible. Now, it doesn't mean everybody gets to do whatever they want. want to do. But we've got to always be at work at making sure we're making that announcement at every level, because I think one of our big struggles is we may have a lot of people who don't think they're welcome here. And so we'll have to kind of get out there and tell them that they're welcome here. But like anything, we're a work in progress, you know. And so, and then how does all of this look? Well, this will be the things we'll be pulling apart in the rest of the book, is that we're gonna, one of the big ways, and I'll hit this and then we'll stop and pray. Paul will spend a bunch of the rest of his letter talking about the way that we talk to each other. That we are very, very attentive to what we say. I think Paul could probably have, could slice people to ribbons verbally. Smart, knew how to make an argument, and then was bold. But sometimes that bold, that truthfulness can be missing some grace. So Paul was learning to be full of grace and truth, like Jesus was full of grace and truth. And so one of the ways that I want you to be attentive to what you're doing to make sure that you are opening the door to Jesus and relating to people the way Jesus would have you do that is by really watching what you say. What words am I listening to, and what words am I speaking? And what that may require of you is being quiet for a while. I don't agree with everything that the Puritans thought about everything, but one of the things the Puritans focused on is that the old adage that hopefully your mother's taught you is, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. Not like the adage that I think is from Steel Magnolias, the lady says, if you can't say anything nice about anyone, sit next to me. We become an ugly talking culture. An ugly talking culture. And now our politicians think that using foul language all the time is the way. It's really shameful.
Yeah.
It's really shameful.
There's one word that's become a common word on public TV now.
I'm telling you, we're playing a game that goes down. And it's talking now, but what does talking lead to?
Action.
Acting. The horrible genocide in Rwanda. It was predicated on years of those Houthis, those Tutsis. Just let that resentment. Well, and it's Nazi Germany. You know, everybody didn't wake up one morning and say, let's kill 6 million Jews. It's decades and really hundreds of years. And all you need is enough of that dry tinder and the right spark to come along. Let me tell you what does fire always do to dry tinder? It always sets it all on fire. And so you have to get rid of both things. And so what Paul will turn to is the way we talk. All right, since we're ending there, let's talk about how we can talk to the Lord. What are some things we